No one survives this. And I mean that literally. No one in that group is walking away from what just happened the same way they came in. They attacked your harmlessness. They looked at you, this gentle, kind, non-threatening person, and they thought, easy target. They thought they could just dismantle you casually, like it was nothing, like you were nothing. And what they just experienced, what is happening to them right now in real time, behind the scenes you can't even fully see yet, is so complete, so total, so devastating that the only word for it is obliteration. This is their fatal catapultation, not a setback, not a loss, a full collapse. And the most insane part, you barely had to do anything. I need you to sit with that for a second before we go any further, because I feel like you still don't fully understand what you just did. You've been carrying this thing, this awareness that something was off, that there was this energy around you, this group of people, this dynamic that felt coordinated in a way that made your chest tight when you thought about it. You couldn't always name it. You couldn't always prove it, but you felt it. That low hum of hostility disguised as normal interaction. That specific kind of exhaustion that comes not from doing too much, but from being around people who are quietly, constantly working against you. You felt it on Sunday mornings when you woke up and your first thought before you even opened your eyes was that something was wrong. Like your nervous system knew what your mind was still trying to catch up to. And here is what nobody wanted to tell you, what nobody gave you credit for. The whole time you were feeling that, you were also evolving, not loudly, not in ways that announced themselves. You were doing it quietly, internally, in ways that didn't show up on the surface yet. But something was shifting in you. Something was building, and they had absolutely no idea. They thought they had you figured out. They had this whole narrative locked in. You were the quiet one, the kind one, the one who wouldn't push back, wouldn't cause a scene, wouldn't fight. They literally built their entire strategy around the assumption that you were harmless, that you were soft, that you were the kind of person they could just keep poking and nothing would ever really change. And I get why they thought that. I get that. Because you're kind. You're gentle. Yes, that's actually real. That's not a performance. But here is what they got wrong. They mistook your gentleness for emptiness. They mistook your silence for surrender. They mistook the fact that you were not reacting for the fact that you were not capable. Big mistake. Big mistake. Actually, the biggest mistake they ever made. Here's the image I keep coming back to when I think about what you actually are. You are the eye of the hurricane, that they mistook for a summer breeze. Think about that for a second. The eye of a hurricane is the calmest place in the entire storm, perfectly still, almost peaceful, the kind of quiet that makes you think nothing is happening. And that's exactly what they saw when they looked at you. They saw the stillness. They felt the calm. They walked right into the center of it, completely unaware that surrounding that calm in every direction was an absolute wall of force. They had no idea. They had no framework to survive. They came at you like you were weather they could ignore. They found out you were the storm that reorders the world. They mistook your grace for a lack of weapons. But your spirit was the sharpest sword in the room. And it was always like that. Not because you couldn't use it, but because you didn't need to yet. Because while they were busy building their little coalition, gathering people, campaign notes, creating this whole group architecture based on their shared narrative about you, you were just becoming. You were going through whatever you were going through. And you were feeling the weight of it. You were having the hard nights and the strange, heavy mornings and the moments where you stood in your kitchen at 2 in the afternoon and just felt this inexplicable grief that you couldn't even fully explain. You were doing all of that. And somewhere inside of all of that, something was getting stronger. Here's where it gets strange, and I need you to really track this with me. The group thought they needed information about you. They thought if they just gathered enough intel, enough voices, enough shared experiences, they could build this airtight case. And for a while, in their minds at least, it felt like that was working. They were comparing stories, finding patterns, getting louder and more confident. There was this momentum building in the group that felt unstoppable from the inside. They were finishing each other's sentences. They were validating each other. They were feeding on the energy of collective certainty. You know that feeling when a group of people are all absolutely sure about something and the certainty itself becomes its own kind of evidence. That's what was happening. Yes, they had convinced themselves. They came as a pack, thinking there was safety in numbers. They genuinely believed that outnumbering you meant overpowering you. But here's what they didn't understand about you. A lion doesn't lose sleep over the opinions of sheep. And you were never the sheep in this story. You were never the one who needed the group to feel safe. You were never the one whose power depended on consensus or agreement or backup. You just were, fully, quietly, and that kind of self-contained power is the only thing a pack mentality genuinely cannot process, because it doesn't need anything from them. It doesn't respond to their pressure. It doesn't shrink under their numbers. It just continues to exist, whole and unmoved, while they exhaust themselves trying to find a crack that isn't there. But here is the thing about structures built on distortion. They don't hold, not because of some poetic justice or dramatic narrative arc. They don't hold because they are not built on anything real. And when the cracks start, they spread fast. Because everyone in that group was also quietly watching everyone else, measuring, wondering if this group will turn on one person this completely. What stops them from doing it to me? That question. That thought lives in the back of every single person's mind in a group like that. Nobody says it out loud, but it is there, under everything, like water pressure behind a wall. And then something happened. Something that made the pressure impossible to contain. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't you standing up and delivering some devastating speech that exposed everyone. No. It was quieter than that and way more powerful. Your awareness, the things you knew, the things you said in passion, the completely normal observation you made, started landing differently. Information couldn't have had, by their logic, was somehow informing your instincts. Yes, things you said that were not directed at them, were not even about them, were landing like you had access to their private conversations. And you did. Yes, not because anyone was feeding you information, not because you were running some counter operation, but because you were tapped into something they didn't know was a resource. You were listening to yourself. You were trusting your own perception. Your intuition had been getting sharpened this whole time quietly, and they had been operating on the assumption that you were operating blind. Their fatal mistake was assuming your silence meant you were finished. Yeah, when in reality you were just witnessing their collapse. You were watching it happen from that calm, still center, the eye of the thing, while they experienced it as chaos. You didn't have to narrate it. You didn't have to announce it. You just watched with this quite unshakable clarity as the whole structure they had built started to come apart at every single seam. They started to wonder if there was a move. Yeah, they started looking at each other differently. That's when the architecture started to crack. The head of the thing, the person of energy that was holding it together. When that shifted, the whole group felt it simultaneously. And because the only thing they actually had in common was their shared focus on you as the problem, when that focus started to splinter, there was nothing underneath it. They didn't have real loyalty to each other. They had shared resentment toward you. And resentment isn't glue, it's acid. It holds things together for a while and then it eats through everything. They started turning on each other, quietly at first, then not quietly at all. And you did not orchestrate any of it. You were just living your life. You were just doing the work of becoming more yourself, more clear, more grounded, less willing to shrink. And that shift in you, that completely internal, private, non-performative shift, was radiating out into every interaction, every space you moved through, every conversation you had. Your energy was changing, your frequency was rising, and people who were built around the idea of you being a certain way, being available to be a certain kind of target, they could feel that the thing that had been feeding off of was no longer accessible. You leveled up past them, not because you were trying to win, because you were just trying to heal and grow. But the effect was the same. And here is the part that I find almost poetic, because it's so precise, and you didn't have to raise a single finger to defeat them. The very light they tried to dim became the fire that consumed their entire agenda. Think about what that means. Every time they pushed against your light, every whisper, every coordinated story, every attempt to make you smaller, they were essentially pouring fuel onto something they thought they were extinguishing. Poetic. They thought suppression was possible. They thought if they applied enough collective pressure, the thing in you that was alive and clear and real would just go out. Instead, it burned hotter and steadier and cleaner. And eventually that heat reached everything they had constructed, and it didn't survive contact. Now, here is what I really need you to hear, because this part is crucial. Some of them are going to try to come back around. Some of them are already trying. There is going to be this attempt at casual re-entry, like nothing happened, like isn't this whole history of what they did and who they were in that group, and what they said and what they believed. They are going to show up with this energy that wants to be forgiven without ever actually acknowledging what needs to be forgiven. They are going to try to normalize contact again, because they felt something when they lost access to your energy, and they want it back. I need you to understand what that is. It's not growth, and you know that. It's not remorse. It's recognition of power. They felt what it was like to be in your orbit when things were good, and they wanted back in. But they are coming back as the same person who chose to be in that group. And that matters. Your peace is non-negotiable. That has to be the thing that guides you here. Not revenge, not punishment, not even justice necessarily. Just the uncompromising protection of the space you have built inside yourself. Because that space is where your power actually lives. It's not in the collapse of the group, as satisfying as it is to watch. The real power is in the fact that you stopped being available to be diminished. You stopped apologizing for the space you take up. You stopped dimming yourself down to make other people feel comfortable. And when you stopped doing that, the whole system that depended on you doing that had nowhere left to go. Yes. They are shocked right now. The collective stunned silence that's falling over the people who thought they could take you down is their first real encounter with who you actually are. They spent all this time and energy building a case against a version of you that doesn't even fully exist anymore. They were fighting a shadow, and the person standing here now, the person you've become through all of this pressure and all of this pain and all of these quite grinding mornings where you just kept going anyway. This person is not who they prepared for. They miscalculated completely, catastrophically, and they know it. Here is the thing about fatal capitulation. And I want to be specific about what that means, because the title of this isn't random. It's not just a loss. It is a surrender. It is when the thing that was coming for you runs out of momentum, runs out of options, runs out of the will to keep going. It's when the aggressor becomes the person on their knees, not because you put them there, but because their own architecture collapsed under the weight of its own dishonesty. That's what this is. This isn't you winning a battle. This is the battle ceasing to be a battle because one side just stopped having anything left to fight with. And this, right here, right now, this isn't just their surrender. This is the universe signing the eviction notice for every toxic force in your life, every single dynamic that was draining you, every person who showed up in your space pretending to be neutral while quietly feeding the thing that was organized against you. Every structure that depended on your compliance and your smallness and your willingness to make yourself less. All of it is being cleared. Not gradually, not partially, completely. And what gets left behind when that clearing is done is just you, the real you, in a space that finally fits. No one survives that intact. No one walks away from that kind of collapse the same. The group is finished. Not because of anything dramatic, because of something real. Because your growth was real. Your alignment was real. Your refusal to stay small was real. And real things outlast constructed things every single time. Always. And so what do you do with this? You keep going. You don't look back trying to verify the collapse or is complete. You don't monitor their downfall to make sure it's sufficiently satisfying. You trust what you already know. That what happened here was a full dismantling, that the thing that was organized against you has turned on itself, and that your part in it was simply being too much of yourself for their system to handle. You take up your space. You let yourself want things openly without apologizing for it. You let the version of you that was always there, that quiet, sharp, alive version that you push down and behind walls and into the back corners of yourself because it felt too expansive to let out. You let that person start to move forward. That's the version of you that this whole experience was building toward. Not someone harder, not someone colder, someone clearer, someone who knows the difference between kindness and self-erasure, someone who can be gentle without being available to be destroyed, someone who can stand in the eye of the storm, completely still, completely calm, and know with absolute certainty that the wall of force surrounding that stillness belongs entirely to them. They came for your harmlessness and found out that harmless was never the whole story. It was just the part you let them see. The rest of you, the full, complicated, rooted, messy, capable, alive rest of you was waiting, quietly, patiently, becoming like the eye of the hurricane that the whole time looked like a summer breeze. And now that's the only version that left standing. That's not the end of something. That's the beginning of everything. Love you.